All right, guys, I'm back to answer some asks. I'm going to be doing this a little bit differently today, just trying to save myself some time in production. So I'm just going to share my screen as I go rather than like editing screenshots later on. I'm just saying it'll look maybe a little bit different. But the other thing is I only have about 5 asks. I do have something else I can share, but I need to research it a little bit more and ask permission to share it from the person who sent it to me. So if I don't get any more asks, I might only be doing one video this week unless I get around to figuring that other thing out. Anyway, so let's get started on these. First one, I find it weird and frankly bad writing if some foreshadowing and symbolism comes true and others don't. For example, Glenn picks up the bat in season 5, foreshadowing his death. That had follow through. But Beth wearing the iconic sheriff's hat and picking up and keeping the DC spoon means nothing and had no follow through. That's what bugs me more than anything is the lack of payoff or follow through. Yeah, no, totally agreed. And there's been and this is why this is the biggest thing we harp on is that there's symbolism that hasn't been fulfilled yet, and that's why we think she's coming back. I mean, that's really the crux of all of it is the setup without the payoff. And it's not even just Glenn. I mean, that's one example that's a really good example, but there are lots of things that have been paid off. I mean, pretty much every other thing, every other character arc in the entire show, right? Let's see, let's try to name a few of them. I know that when Carl was walking around the pudding house, there was evidence of him going blind, which he did. In fact, in that episode, there is a basically shot by shot visual parallel to when he's actually bitten, which leads to his death. So all of that was going on there was a foreshadow of Carl's eventual death in the show, which is different than it is in the comic book. So once again, I'm going to say they knew about Carl's death back in season 4, and he did not die until season 8, right? And they knew that. Now, would any of us have realized that? No, we didn't realize. I mean, we don't watch Carl's symbolism nearly as much as we did Beth and Daryl's, so none of us picked up on that. But going back, we can see it, right? In one of the last videos, I talked about Tyrese getting cut on the arm at the prison and it getting infected, and that was a foreshadow of him, how he died, and them cutting off his arm where he was bitten. We have 7/12, where Rick falls into a pit of walkers and Michonne thinks he's dead, and then he's resurrected, and we have now seen that play out perfectly, that, you know, he got blown off the bridge, she thought he was dead, eventually she found him again, they were reunited in The Ones Who Live, all of that. So yeah, 100%. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. And the thing is, the one way that I might be able to accept this is if Emily had decided she was done with the show and she didn't want to continue and she wanted out, because we do know that the show is pretty respectful of its actors and they may ask for some time to give them a good death and shore things up, but they will let them out of their contracts early if that's what they want. We've seen that many times, okay? But they didn't even go that way with it. That might have been a little bit smarter of a way to go with it, to have her say that, because that would have been more believable to me, that, you know, nothing they could do about it. It's not Gimple's fault the symbolism didn't get finished. It was because the actor wanted out. But that's not the case. You know, Emily cried and said she didn't want to leave and she was way sad to leave and she didn't know she was leaving. And you know what I mean? And none of that is very believable when it comes to the symbolism. So yeah, I 100% agree. I do think there is going to be follow through and we just haven't seen it yet. So yeah, we're just sitting here twiddling our thumbs and waiting for the follow through to show up, right? Thank you for that ask. Next one. Hey, I just had a thought here, but as much as I believe Beth survived, I can't think of a better death for her. I mean, at first she wanted to die, but ended up choosing life, and then wanted to live, but chose death to save her friend. It's so freaking poetic and beautiful. Am I the only one thinking like this? Um, Among TDers, you might be. I mean, I see what you mean. That, you know, she became very strong. And she was trying to help Noah. And yeah, I mean, you're right. All of that is very heroic, but it actually goes back to the ask I just read before this, in that it felt senseless because there was no payoff to what they had set up. If they had paid every single thing off, if we had seen all of it, if we had seen her become the leader, you know, the fulfillment of the sheriff's hat, the new sheriff in town, her relationship with Daryl, you know, if everything had been paid off and then they decided to kill her off, at least that would make a little more sense because they had brought her arc to a close. But they set up all this stuff and then didn't pay it off, and that felt senseless. It felt like she had so much more potential and so much more story to tell, and then it just got cut off. And so that's why people, TDers didn't like it and thought it was terrible. And I mean, even a lot of the GA who don't believe she's coming back and, don't believe what we believe, they still didn't like it. You had the whole petition that got like 60,000 signatures. You had spoons being sent in to Gimple. And most of those people, they don't believe she's coming back. They just believe this was like a really crappy thing that they did to the audience to kill off this character. But see, even the GA, even though that they're not maybe completely consciously aware of it, they were picking up on the same things. They were picking up on we've got so much further to go. And then when it got cut off, it just felt so awful. And I mean, that I want to be careful how I say this. On the one hand, that might have been part of the plan. And I don't mean because they really did kill her off and wanted us to feel that way. I mean, maybe they wanted us to feel that way in terms of realism, because when someone dies in real life, it does feel that way, right? That's why it's so tragic and so hard to deal with. But once again, I'm going to go back to this isn't real life, this is fiction. And, it's the Chekhov's gun thing. Every single thing that is going to be put into the show is going to be important at some point. Okay, that's what Chekhov's gun means. It's a literary term. And Chekhov said, if you're going to put a gun above the mantle, you need to use that gun in the story at some point, because once you mention it that it's there, his case it would have been a reader because he was a writer. The reader is looking for that gun to be part of the story. So it just means that every single detail that you put in has to mean something at some point. And trust me, Gimple operates by that premise. Every single thing he puts in is on purpose. And that's how we can see that he pays off the symbolism, because um, the blind, you know, hints toward Carl being blind was just background stuff. Most of the GA would say, oh, that's not a thing, you're reading too much into that. But we weren't. I mean, I could go through that whole episode and show how every single part of that foreshadowed every single part of Carl's arc, that he was going to lose his eye, that he was going to die early, that he was going to be bitten, um, all of it, right? So clearly, Gimple operates on the Chekhov's gun premise in that what he puts in ends up being important, which is why most of us can't let this go, even though it's been 10 years, right? Because that symbolism is still there. And then, on top of that, we get recently all this social media suspiciousness and all of that, right? So I see what you mean, that she was being heroic, but it's just not quite enough for most of us, because there was so much that was left undone, so many promises that the writers made that were not paid off. And that's why it felt crappy, right? Not to mention the tragedy of it and all of that. But I do see your point, though. So thank you for that. Okay, Obadala 2. I just rewatched the scene from Daryl Dixon season 1 where they are watching Mork and Mindy. And that scene is just so strange to me. We see Daryl go from being happy to being really sad in the space of a few seconds, and the music, his expression, etc., actually turn very dark. It's a very mysterious scene because we are never told exactly what is happening there. He does mention later that he used to watch it with Merle, so I suppose that could be it. But it just felt a lot deeper than that to me upon rewatch. We've also seen that Daryl can mention and talk about Merle without much difficulty. Anyways, I'm way overthinking this, but it made me wonder if it's maybe something to do with Mork and Mindy that we, the audience, are not even aware of. Like, did he and Beth, for instance, talk about Mork and Mindy in a scene we haven't seen? Or did they maybe have episodes of Mork and Mindy at the prison library and the group was able to watch them? I don't know. It just felt like way deeper of a moment than we got an explanation for. So I will try to dig up the analysis I did on Mork and Mindy back when this episode first aired. I don't know if I want to try to go into it here because I'm going to screw it up. It's been so long since I looked at it. I do think that there is deeper meaning there. Like, I think you're absolutely right. You're picking up on something that's true. But I don't know. I never think that it's something physical that we didn't know about. That would just be a little bit too convenient to me. I don't think they had TV at the prison. I felt like the part of the reason Daryl was so happy and excited to watch this is because it's been 10 years since he watched a TV show. Of course he remembers them, but it was just kind of fun to be able to do that when they don't really have this in their world anymore. So I kind of doubt that they had it at the prison. And I don't know. People like to say maybe there was more that Beth and Daryl talked about, or more that they did, or maybe that they hooked up. And I don't know. To me, that just doesn't ring true. I just don't think the writers would do that. Now, just my opinion. I could be wrong. But I think it's more about what the subject matter is and what Daryl is thinking, because we've seen him do this more than once. The thing I go back to is when he first brought Lydia to Hilltop, and it was the winter episode, the snow episode, and he kind of did the same thing when he was looking at the paintings. He looked up at them and he was smiling, and it was like, on the one hand, trying to show that maybe he'd finally forgiven himself for Glenn and for Herschel, and he could look at their pictures and smile and think of them in a happy, nostalgic way. And then his eyes shift to, I think, where Beth's picture is, and he stops smiling. So he does almost the exact same thing there. And I think it just is going to show that he's really not over that yet, And in this case, um, like I said, I'll dig it up and find it so you guys can read it or listen to it. I'm sure I put it in a video back then, but um, if you look at what Mork and Mindy is about, and they showed parts of this episode in particular, it feels like it has ties to Beth. And, I think that he could be thinking about something like that. Like it's striking a chord with him because of who Beth was to him and how they interacted. And then there's romance between Mork and Mindy. And, somehow I just don't believe he's thinking about Isabel here or Leah. I think he's thinking about Beth. And so anyway, things like that. I think it has more to do with he's smiling and he's happy because he's watching the show and he's having fun with the kids. And then suddenly the meaning of it sort of sinks in for him. And that makes him unhappy because it makes him think of Beth, and he still is having a hard time smiling or being okay with her death, right? That's the one that he really hasn't gotten over yet. That's my take on it anyway. So check the show notes, and I will link up if I can find it. I should be able to find it without any trouble. And you can look at the what we talked about back when this first aired about Mork and Mindy, but I think it's something like that. Just my opinion. All right. You know what I love? I love that Emily is looking more matured and older. She still looks young for her age, lucky genes, but she's also looking a little older these days. If Beth comes back, then no one can use the looks too young BS, LOL. Also, Beth would be like almost 30 by now in the timeline, right? Yeah, she would. If she was 18 in season 4 and it's been more than 10 years, then yeah, she would. But yeah, I agree. I mean, on the one hand, I'm sure they will still use that BS because they always will. But you're right that it's going to make less sense than ever before. So yeah, that's a good thing. All right. Okay, fair warning, please excuse underage ears from the room for this slightly indelicate ask, LOL. Your recent answer about how quick or slow Bethel's relationship would progress got me thinking, how sexy do you think they're going to get? Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think I've ever actually seen Norman film a love scene in his career. He has. He's filmed a few. It's that just not something is that just not something he's comfortable doing? Obviously, the romp fest in The Ones We Love was so different because it was Rochon and they have a history together, but that series was also much sexier than TWD ever was. Daryl Dixon seems to be a much tamer show, so something super spicy might not fit. Long way to ask a kind of blunt question. Are we getting a full-blown Bethel sex scene or some fade to black BS? I love that the fade to black is BS. Or do you think it will be even vaguer and they might imply they're sleeping together, but we never see evidence of it? Okay. So first of all, yeah, Norman has done a few. And in fact, look for, is it called Sky or Big Sky? The one that he did with Diane Kruger has scenes in it. And that's actually how they met. And that's a pretty good show. I actually enjoyed that movie. Anyway, so the first answer I have to give is we don't know. We don't know what they will do, but here's my take on it. They've come a long way in what they can show in the show, right? Because of streaming rights, because it's not on network TV at 7 p.m. They used to have these rules about how, there were still young viewers awake and watching at 7 p.m. So for a while, they had shows that would be on at 10 or 11 at night, and they would give them F words because, the assumption was that little kids were in bed by then and not watching, which might have been true in most cases, but also it's a really big assumption, right? Anyway, so they wouldn't give the 7 o'clock shows the more edgy, content. But that's not the case anymore. I mean, in a way, I don't want to say it's a good thing that it's taken this long for her to return, because I don't think any of us would ever actually say that with a straight face. But one good thing that might come out of it is that they are allowing more into the show now. So you're right that if the show was still on AMC, just airing on live TV, not with the streaming, not with, all of the technology that's come out in the last 10 years, we probably would not have gotten as heavy a sex scene with Rick and Michonne. And we probably would not have F words, or at least not as many, right? And so it's not so much, would they or wouldn't they? It was what they were allowed to do by the network. I mean, we do know that in season 5, Self Help, they had that sex scene between Abraham and Rosita, and AMC they did get away with it. The show, they did let them put it in, but AMC almost made them cut it, almost made them take it out because they thought that was too spicy. So that's obviously not the case anymore. Like you said, in the ones that live, it was way more explicit than that. And I gotta say, I really liked the one in the ones that live because we're not really talking about, we're kind of jokingly calling it a romp fest, but it was actually a really emotional scene. And I thought it was very tastefully done. And I thought it was very appropriate and very sweet and very, just very touching. Like I really liked the way they did it. So I don't think we're actually going to get a Bethel romp scene that's just like gratuitous sex, but I do think that because they are putting more things in now, I think they'll give us a pretty decent spicy scene. I think it'll be like the ones who live in that it will be, more spicy and explicit, but that it'll be tasteful and that it'll be sweet and that we're all gonna really enjoy watching it. I also think that they've been very careful in the past. I mean, one of the writers, it wasn't Gimple, but one of the writers who was on The Talking Dead after one of the Leah episodes said this. Um, I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the name of the gal that played Leah Collins, Lynn Collins. I hope I'm saying that right. She mentioned that they couldn't even do a kissing scene because it was during COVID. And the writer jumped in and said, no, 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 no. Even if it hadn't been for COVID, we would not have done a kissing scene because we know how sensitive the fandom is to Daryl and his love life, right? Now, that doesn't seem as what's the word, like as genuine anymore because they did have him kiss Isabel. But I think that there's more to it. I think that was their excuse for not doing the love scene is both COVID and, saying that people are sensitive about it. But I think it has more to do with um I don't know, not the genuineness of the relationship. I don't know if that's quite what I'm trying to say, but it's like Leah was always going to be a villain and the relationship was always toxic. And the writer told us that, okay? We're not just coming up with that. Like the writer said, there was always this underlying toxicity, even if Daryl wasn't terribly aware of it for a long time. So I think that's why they didn't show the kiss because they don't want to show like the intimacy of kissing of a makeout scene with someone when there's toxicity in the relationship. And it's almost like a symbolic thing. They're just not going to do that in the show. So that's why they didn't. Now with Isabel, they had him kiss her, but there wasn't toxicity in that relationship. He was genuinely interested in her, and even though we, didn't really want him to be with her, she was a genuinely nice person. And if Beth was not coming back and things had not played out, I think he could have been happy with her because they were both good people and they both cared about Laurent. And you know what I mean? Like I think that in another world where Beth was not returning, possibly could have worked, And so they showed him kissing her. And also, I think they were trying to like warm us up and get us used to that a little bit before his soulmate actually appears. But anyway, my point is, um, I think when Beth shows up because she is his soulmate and because there is so much history, yeah, I think that they're going to show as much as they can get away with showing. I think we will see them kiss. I think we will see the sex scene. I think they're gonna do it in a big way because this is the soulmate that everybody's been waiting for Daryl. Even those who don't think she's coming back, who aren't TDers, they've been waiting for him to find his happy ending, whoever that is, to find his soulmate. So when he finally gets there, it's a really long, rambling way of saying, yeah, I think we're going to see it. I think we're going to see a lot of it. And it's interesting that you say that the ones who live were different because Roshon has a history. Beth and Daryl have a history. I know that it never went canon, so it's a different kind of history, but still, there is a history there. And that history was driving the show in season 5. Make no mistake, Coda was one of the most watched episodes ever, and everybody kind of hated it. Like they thought it sucked. But the reason everyone was watching it is because they were watching to see if Daryl would find Beth. I mean, everybody wanted the storyline. even the people who hated the storyline, like the carolers, they were still watching to see what would happen, right? So when she shows up again, there is a massive history that millions and millions of fans are familiar with, and they're going to want to see what happens. So yeah, anyway, long-winded way to answer your question, but I personally think that, yeah, I think we're going to see a lot of it, and I'm excited for that. And I think it'll be great. It'll be, I mean, at this point, they've made us wait so long that they darn well better give us something that was worth waiting for, right? Otherwise, they're going to have angry fans again, and I don't think they'll do that. So, anyway, like I said, this is the one way in which it might be good that things waited so that they can show us more. But yeah, it's a really good question. All right, guys, that is the end of my asks for today. I'm going to call it there. And if I can get you a second video later in the week, I will. But otherwise, I will be back on Sunday for the next episode of Dead City. Have a great week, everyone.